Hi there, this is Elise Bennin, your marketing mentor. And this is the podcast for you if and only if you are ready to leave the feast or famine syndrome behind, and I mean for good. Is it easier to find clients than to find a job these days? That's just one of the questions I debated with Maggie Mistal. She is an intuitive career coach and also a podcaster. Her podcast is called Making a Living with Maggie, and she's developed a very interesting framework that beautifully complements my simplest marketing plan framework. So we are doing a podcast swap. Here's me interviewing her on many timely topics, including whether AI will replace us. So listen and learn. Hello, Maggie. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Elise. Excited to be here.
Me too. So as I do with everyone, I will ask you to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background.
Absolutely. So I'm an intuitive career and executive coach. I also speak, train, do mindset work with people, personality patterns, and even biofield tune. But I know we're here to talk mostly about the career coaching.
Yes.
So we'll focus on that. But that's me. And thankfully, I've been called one of the nation's best known career coaches by a large media network. So I've definitely gotten the word out there.
Awesome. So you're promoting yourself well, obviously.
Well, hopefully you can let me know.
Okay.
You're the expert on that.
We will talk a little bit about this, but just give us a little bit of your story. Why is this what you do? How did you get here?
Yeah, well, life has a way of getting you onto your correct path. I actually started in accounting, believe it or not. It was the easiest, quickest way to get a job out of college. And I shouldn't say easy in terms of the work, but there was an internship program. I got into this great big firm and I thought I had it all set up. Unfortunately, I didn't actually like the job when I got there. And so I switched pretty quickly to consulting, management consulting, which I thought would solve all my problems. But after working in 3 or 4 different offices with that firm and 3 or 4 different groups, I made my way to change management, which, if you know, is about the psychology of people in business and things like that. And it was good, but it still didn't work for me. I really craved working with individuals. So luckily, and not in a good way, my firm was indicted. And so all of a sudden, I had the opportunity to really figure out my career as opposed to just sit back and, pretend I was mostly happy and move on. But yeah, and that's when I found what was called the Life Purpose Institute in San Diego. And I thought life purpose sounded good. I wanted to figure that out for myself. And actually what they do is they have this was like 20 years ago, but I went through their process to become a coach in how to do this. And I mainly did it for myself. I'll be honest. It was a selfish exercise because I just wanted to figure out what is my purpose. And this was the only way they gave you their program, was by getting certified as one of their coaches. But I'll tell you, it opened up my world. And I decided to give coaching a try and did change out of consulting into more of a HR trainer, learning and development role for Martha Stewart's company. It was a great way to pay the bills while I tried coaching on the side. And I'll tell you, Elise, it really took off from there. My boss found out I was a career coach. He said, you should coach too as part of your job, because they really just brought me in to do management training work. But he said, oh my gosh, you're a career coach too? Please coach our employees. And after a couple of years of that, Martha launched a radio station on Sirius. They needed people and content. I pitched a career talk show. And, and the rest is history. I really was able to expand my brand and do that career talk show called Making a Living with Maggie for 7 years.
Wow.
Sirius XM. Yeah, it was a dream come true. I love talk radio like this, podcasting. And and I was it was amazing to me that could even happen. And now it's a podcast again, because Martha's back to just doing her own show on Sirius XM, but it really was able to spark me to continue to do Making a Living now as a podcast.
And it sounds like also over the years you've developed your own framework, kind of like I have the simplest marketing plan framework that just, is one of the things that happens when you're doing something for so long, you just distill it down to a framework. So tell us about your framework.
Yes, basically soul search, research, then job search. And what I found, Elise, in working with people on their careers is that a lot of people have ideas. Of course they do, right? They have a soul, they have dreams, and that's their soul search. But then a lot of them just jump right to job search and try to find it out there and shoehorn themselves into the best they can find. And then they see they're not happy. And what I realized in working with clients was that research step in between was really crucial. So that's looking before you leap. That's informational interviewing people in and around what you want to do. So you really get clear on specifically your version of that and how that can work or how it might not work. And so that soul search first is great to getting to your own answers, but the research in between, before the job search, combined with that, has really been the add-on to my framework that I've seen with great success for my clients, actually getting to where they want to be and not having to settle for less.
And as you know, most of my listeners are either already self-employed creative professionals or wanting to be self-employed. And so I'm curious, how do you apply this framework, or would you apply this framework to looking for clients and looking for projects and building a business?
Yeah, well, it just sounds too good, right? Soul search, research, job search, to not be job search. But you're right. It absolutely, some of us, myself included, right? We're really meant to be entrepreneurs. I'm the best boss I ever had, although I'm thankful to say I've had some really good ones. But yeah, this can definitely apply. And I've had clients become their own bosses as part of the process. It's the same steps, frankly, because when you think about going into business for yourself, you've got to do the soul search to know what are your strengths, what does the ideal day look like for you. That age-old question of like, who's your ideal client is very hard for people to answer unless they've done some reflecting and unless they've even researched and actually started to try it. I'll be honest, as a coach, my soul search was going through that Life Purpose training, that Life Purpose Institute training, but I didn't know I wanted to be a coach for sure. I needed to research it. I needed to actually coach people. And so for me, I did 4 years of research, and it was basically a coaching practice, a fledgling one that I was growing. So for a lot of my entrepreneurial clients, it's the same approach. It's just applied in that entrepreneurial manner. And then the job search is more of an action plan, right? It's short-term steps, it's long-term steps. It's what do they need to do to create this business, and what does it need to look like for them to be, not just effective, but enjoyable. Because I'll tell you, my biggest complaint about most people in the career space is, and even I've had fellow folks fellow experts that I've talked to say, well, you can't have everything that you want. Everybody has to do stuff in a job or in a business they don't like. And I'm like, no, you don't. What are you talking about? That's not true. Especially now, right? We have so many different tools that you could outsource anything in your business that you don't want. And people can do that in jobs too. So I'm a big proponent of people going for the ideal and really amping up their expectations of what they can create for themselves and what they can get from the outside world. And so that, when you were talking about entrepreneurship, I just get excited even more because it opens up the world even further than, just say what a particular job can provide. But now, what kind of business do you want to create? So yeah, to me, it's the same process. It applies the same way. The reflection's the same, the research. But what your end goal is going to be is this bigger picture of what does your business look like, not just what does this next job look like.
It's so interesting. And I feel like we could have a couple different debates here. And the first one is about what you've already brought up, which is this question of, if you go through this soul search and research process, are you going to find this job of your dreams or project of your dreams or business of your dreams? And I'm on the other side of it because, well, mostly because that's not how it worked for me. And also because a lot of the people I talk to, they seem like good questions. What do you want? What does your ideal day look like? But I have to say, most people don't know and have a really hard time answering those questions. Do you find that too?
Yes, which is why it's not the first question I ask. It's the last one. In the soul search, there's literally 9 different facets of what a person wants, 9 different elements to the ideal, I'll even call it work situation, because it doesn't have to be a job, it could be a business. So I have my clients actually react to, so whether it's interests, whether it's strengths, whether it's motivators, whether it's work preferences, whether it's salary, whether it's life purpose, right? There's literally 9 different pieces, right, that make up the ideal career scenario, whether that's, again, your own business or a job. And then the last exercise, Elise, is that ideal day in the life where the person starts to imagine, if I were to put all these pieces together, and wave that magic wand, right? If I always tell people, like, imagine you have a magic wand and you can wave it, you can create the world according to you. What would your ideal day look like? And that's where I really raise people's expectations, because the coolest part of my work has been that I've seen those day in the lives come true for my clients, for myself, over and over and over again, Elise. Literally, what people write down becomes their experience. And it's because of the detail that they're able to get into, because we've already chunked it down into these 9 different core areas, that they can then put those puzzle pieces together. So you're right. Most people have no idea when you ask them with a blank sheet of paper, what does your ideal day look like? They need that kind of support with those details. And, if without the details, it's very hard to be on the same page, even with a business, right? You can say even with me, I'm a career coach. Well, that could mean lots of things, right? Well, what specifically do you do? Well, I like to deal with career transformation or people making change. So it truly depends on the details, and this process that I use helps people get there.
And I would think also your clients or my clients' expectation of how long this takes, because one of the things I hear from people almost every day is, I didn't think it would take this long. Why is it taking so long? What am I doing wrong that it's taking so long? How do you handle that?
It's interesting because when consulting, we used to say, and it's so wonderful when you actually look back on your career, how even the quote unquote mistakes or the jobs that you maybe didn't love can still teach you something, right? It's kind of like you were in the right place at the right time. And in consulting, we used to say, you have to go slow to go fast. And so for my clients, where they say, oh, it takes time, is in the research. This is why most people left to their own devices just come up with an idea and then go job search or go create the business. But they don't do that middle step of research because it takes time, right? Mm-hmm. So you're absolutely right about that. But what I tell them is, don't you want to avoid mistakes before you make them? And isn't it easier to figure out how to do this if you talk to someone who's already done it or is doing something similar, right? And wouldn't it be more fun to find your tribe and do this as part of working with and through them, right? So we think it takes longer. And to be honest, it doesn't. The interesting thing is, once you actually start doing the research, the pieces start to fall into place pretty quickly. You start to find, the right people having the right conversations. And then you're like, oh, well, that opens this door. And I didn't even know that was a door. And oh, that's a much easier route than the one I was thinking. So it's a misnomer or a misunderstanding if people think, if I do this research, it's going to draw out this process and it's going to just take me longer. When the reality is, if you want the easier, quicker path that's a better fit, the research is the absolute way to do it. And it can speed you up, but you've got to have that patience to begin with. And to be honest, it's actually fear, at least that's really at the core of that. They say, well, they're just scared to talk to people. That's really what it comes down to. They're not actually complaining to me about the pace. They're more like, well, I'm afraid to talk to people about what I want because I don't know what to say. And what if they ask me about what I want and I don't have an answer? So, so we end up working on that component, which is helping, arrange some confidence around how they can have these informational conversations. And that's really where, the skill building comes in. Because once they get those muscles flexed and working, they're off doing, upwards of 25, 30. I encourage people doing up to 50 or more informational interviews. Because if you really want to do a good job of starting a business or changing careers, that's how many conversations it takes.
So research in your framework and in your context, I think we need to be clear about this, because when I hear research, I think, oh, ChatGPT or Google or something, where you don't have to talk to anyone. But you're talking about actual conversations. And in your own process, I think you said that for 4 years, you were actually kind of doing the work, but under this research umbrella until you figured it out. Is that right?
Yeah. And to be honest, with tools like ChatGPT, they can be a part of the process. I would still encourage people to talk to actual folks because ChatGPT, most jobs and opportunities are still landed by referral. It still does. Your network does still matter. So as great as ChatGPT is, and I'm using it for research for my clients at times, you still need the network of people, right, to really get something off the ground or to make a change. So yeah, ChatGPT can be part of research. So can gathering information and testing things out firsthand, right? Like my coaching practice was, so can talking to other people. These are all actually components of research.
Whether you feel, quote unquote, feel ready or not.
Well, it helps you get ready. And that's that's what research does. And most people realize, what I tell them is, guess what? That research conversation is not about you. In fact, I don't want you talking about yourself at all. Right? So what are you afraid of? You have not, and they say, well, what do they say if they ask me what I'm doing? You say you're exploring. And you thank them for their time and you thank them for sharing their expertise and their insight. At the end of the day, and that's what's, I think most people are just like, well, why would they talk to me about their career? I'm like, because you're making it about that other person, right? When you're researching, you're talking to people who you admire, who have done something you want to do, and you've got to let them know that, right? Like, Elise, I love what you've done with marketing. This is amazing. I'd love to hear more about how you got here. In fact, you're going to be on my podcast as well because of that, right? And who doesn't want to share their story? Especially my favorite research question, I'll let your listeners know, in on this one, is what does it take to be successful? And you can ask anybody that question. What does it take to be successful? And they will answer it. Why? Because it implies they're a success. Mm-hmm. And who doesn't want to think of themselves as a success? And especially talking to someone who's really interested in what the answers are, right? If I have an interested audience and saying, Maggie, what does it take to be a success? I'll talk for half an hour or an hour or 3, right? So you really just have to position this properly, make it all about your informational interviewee, and really be authentically, in an admiration kind of phase with them so that they can, sense that, okay, you really do appreciate what I'm about to say. And people love to be heard. So you will always have an easier time having those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, the other debate I want to have with you is about whether or not it's harder to get a job these days than to get clients, because I do know a lot of people, some older, some not so old, some very young actually, who are trying to get a job. And we're here talking in May of 2025. There's a lot going on. It's very challenging out there at the moment. And people submitting resumes, hundreds and sometimes thousands of resumes and not getting any response and being ghosted. And I know it's very discouraging. And as you said, most jobs are had through referrals and your network. But I'm curious, do you agree with me that it's harder to get a job these days than to get clients?
Thank you for giving me a heads up about this question, in all transparency, because I've been thinking about it at least. And I would say it's hard to find either if you don't know what you're looking for, or if you're trying to be all things to all people. Because when I talk to folks, I get a lot of people, right, who come my way, like, I've been searching on my own for 6 months or a year or longer. And this isn't just now. This is even, throughout my 20 years as a coach. But yeah, definitely now there's a lot of change happening. And usually it's because they're trying to be whatever everybody else wants them to be just to get a job. I literally talked to someone who was a high level professional and they were applying for entry level jobs. I'm like, you're not going to get hired for those. And they were kind of upset with me about that. And I'm like, but you have to understand, you need to go for the jobs that are a fit for who you are and what you bring to the table. And guess what, Elise? The big secret is everybody's valuable. It doesn't matter if you're young, more mature as a worker, or new to the workforce, everybody has value. But unless you've done the soul search and research and know how to articulate that value, you can't expect the world to do it. You can't just, you could tweak your resume and you could use all the AI tools to do it. But unless you're really centered and clear about what that unique core genius is that you bring and where you're a fit, the thing about research that I also like is you also identify the right organizations, or the right clients if you're in your own business. You identify those details of where you're a fit so that you know where to interview. And then they ask you, like, why are you here? And you have an answer that's really well thought out, better than they've even thought through it, right? So I don't think a lot of people if you're trying to blanket your resume out there, or if you're trying to say, well, especially for career changers, You cannot have a resume that's not a fit in today's, if you're just job searching by submitting a resume and it's not a perfect fit and doesn't have all the past experiences, you won't even get selected, right? This system is not going to look at you and say, well, I think that you can make this change. No, the system is matching apples to apples. And if it doesn't see a match, you don't get called back. You don't get an email back, right? To your
And
point.
when you say the system, are you talking about AI?
Well, AI is being used before it was applicant tracking systems, right? So, and AI is being used by corporations and organizations as well, to vet these resumes. If you look, recruiting in every company has been decreased. There are fewer and fewer actual people in these departments, and they're leveraging more technology to look through resumes. So whether it's AI or before whatever technology software they had to do that, it's not going to look at a career changer and say, let's give this person a chance. That's just not what it's designed to do. It's designed to find the person who matches what's in the job description, right? So for my clients, many of whom are career changers, we don't go that route. I tell them to use the back door. Don't use that front door. Don't try to knock on that, because it's just going to be self-defeating, which is what people experience. Right. And the back door is through referrals and through people, because everybody has, again, a unique core genius and a unique value, and there's absolutely a place for you. I know that because that's why you're here. And when you do the soul search and research, you can articulate where and what that is, and it makes the job easier for these companies, because companies will tell you they can't find the right clients. I mean, the right candidates. They tell you flat out they cannot find the right candidates. You know why? Because our system is broken. This front door is not making a good match unless you've been in one job and stayed on that path for your entire career, right? And you're kind of that one-track person, that linear person. If you've ever changed careers, that front door is very difficult to get through. But that is not a discouraging, point, because guess what? The back door is definitely easier to open and get through, and I help people through it all the time.
And I am so happy to never have had to go through that front door. I mean, very lucky, but that I was fired from my second job out of college and decided I was never working for anyone again. And it's now 37 years. But I don't envy anyone who is trying to do that. And one of the reasons I say it's harder to get a job than to get clients is simply for math, because you don't need one client. You need 3 or 4 or 10 clients, and those are easier to find than one job that's going to be your everything. That's my take on it. What do you think of that?
Well, I think there's probably 3 or 4 or 10 companies you could work for. The problem is when the job search, the way that we set it up is it's square peg, square hole. And if you're anything else other than a square, you're not going to fit. Right? But the reality is companies need people that are not just square pegs. Look at how much change we're going through. Companies right now are like, we don't even know what jobs are going to look like in 5 years, much less 2. Right?
Right. Totally.
So I actually, with my clients, what ends up happening is they end up seeing multiple places where they can be a fit, right? Because they understand who they are and what they can do. And then we can see they've done the research to know where that's of value. So believe it or not, most people are a fit for more than one job. There's lots of jobs. They just you can't let it up to the employer to articulate it, because that's just not where they are. I was on the inside, right, at a couple of companies. And when I saw people do job descriptions, you know how they created them when they were doing job postings for new hires?
How?
They put in everything they could possibly think of that they might need.
Right, which is kind of unrealistic, right?
Yeah, but they're like, we might as well cast a wide net. Right? That would be cool if we could find somebody if had all this. Why not try? Right? And then they see what they get, and guess what they do? They adjust the role to what they get. And most people don't know that. And most people aren't negotiating during the job search even. Like during the interview process, you can be negotiating the role and changing it with the help of the interviewer. If you're, knowledgeable enough about what you bring to the table and how it can be of service. I don't coach my clients to just take what's offered. I coach my clients to completely change what that job posting is and customize it to how they can really serve, and even take out the stuff that's not a good fit for them. Because if they're not going to be good at it, why keep it in the role? And I know it's a laundry list anyway, right? So there's a lot of the realities of this process that most people don't understand. So they're still operating as if it's apples to apples and I have to pretend I'm an apple even though I'm an orange, It's like, no, because you're going to show up on day one and be an orange and be unhappy. This way you can be the orange that you are and find the place where you fit perfectly into that fruit basket.
I love that. Before we wrap up, I do want to talk a bit about AI because even just today, I was listening to another podcast about AI and where it's going. And the main message seems to be AI literate people are what companies are looking for because everyone's going to have to be, I think they called it a boss agent. So a boss to AI agents or know how to use the chatbots. Are you seeing that in corporate job descriptions or like what people are looking for at this point?
I haven't quite seen it yet worded in the job descriptions, but what I saw, I'm reading the headlines about what employers want, and what first came out was AI jobs. That's where all the opportunity is. AI jobs are growing. And then the next round was, well, here's what an AI job is. An AI job is a regular job where you know how to use AI to make the job more efficient or more effective, right? So it was about utilization, right? Just an awareness. And
Right.
I don't think most people, Elise, are really using it yet. I really don't. Especially people who are, doing a good job and everything seems to be going fine. I don't think they're looking proactively for ways to use AI. When I saw this information about this is what companies are hiring for, and to your point of what you're hearing, I think it's very important for people to be proactive about playing around with these tools, seeing how they might leverage them, because the tools are new and nobody's figured out the only way to use them, right? They're applicable in many different ways. So in my case, I can share an example where I had a client reach out and he's very good at his job. So of course, what does the boss do? You're the best one on the team. I need you to teach everybody else how to do what you do. Right? And that's not a new request, but he was like, oh my God, what do? I don't know how to train people. He's like, Maggie, you've done training and development. Like, help me. And I said, have you used AI? And he had never thought to use it. And so we had talked about what it can do and how it can develop presentations or slides or give you a structure, depending on now people within companies do need to be careful because sometimes now organizations have their own vetted AI that won't share all their private information, right? So you do want to be careful with that and make sure you're using the proper tools. But he was amazed at what you could create and how, helpful that was and how fast it was. And now he's like, got back to me and said, thank you so much. My boss is very happy with my presentation. Meanwhile, he was looking at it as a chore, right? Like, oh God, now I got to train my whole team. And that's not my thing. I don't even know what I do. I'm like, well, you can actually even use AI to interview you like you and I are doing today to get to information. So he hadn't thought to use the tool. And I think a lot of people haven't thought to use these tools. And no matter what their job is, just try them out. Try them out for personal things. Try them out for work. I mean, for me, I use AI note takers now with my clients, and they're very impressed with the level of detail and insight and organization, that the AI is able to quickly create. I still have to obviously I'll be honest, I did initially just send the AI format, like, here you go, here it is, because it's good, but it wasn't, what's the word? It wasn't as good as it could be because we still need human beings. That's a newsflash. And so now I kind of cut and paste it out, and then I'm going through it again to make it something real. It's very useful. It's kind of like raw material, and you gotta put your own extra on there to really make it work. But it wasn't horrible. It's like a 5-minute extra activity. But I found that that's what works best. Use the tools, but use them as kind of your fodder to get to where you need, especially for marketing materials. I know that's something, that you're very good at, and we've talked about. I mean, it's amazing when you do know what your brand is. There's a lot you can do to market your message using AI, but you have to be careful. You have to be careful it still sounds like you. You have to be careful it still, doesn't go off the rails and use words you would never use. So you still need to manage the tools. To your point, what do you call them? Boss agents. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Because the tools by themselves are useful, but they don't discount what an actual human can bring to the situation.
And actually, just one last question on that then. Do you think AI will replace you?
I think some people think it could, right? Like, well, let me just go ask ChatGPT. Here's my resume. Let me dump in my resume and say, ChatGPT, what jobs are best for me in this economy at this time? And will it spit out a bunch of jobs that could be good possibilities? Yeah. But do you still need to soul search and research and then job search? Yeah. So I think it's a very useful tool. I think it can help. But what is different, again, is, it's like I guess you could call it not so much a one size fits all, but there are nuances to people that, and I'm sure you see this as well, Elise. When I'm talking to my clients, I introduced myself today as an intuitive career and executive coach because intuition is a huge part of the value I bring, right? So does ChatGPT have intuition? Not that I know of. It'll give you answers based on what's out there, and it's very good at compiling that information, but it may not have the intuition on you as a person and what's really next for you. Because if your past history isn't really where you were meant to be, it's just going to take what you have and rehash it into something new. It'll try to make that match, but what if that isn't your right path? An intuitive career coach will say, I think you're off track, and here's what I'm picking up, and is that true? And that's when the light bulb goes off. And the person says, oh, I see. So rather than just, again, AI is great for when you have something existing and you're trying to, if you're on a path and you're never going to stray from that, and that's where you're going to stay, it can help you translate that. But there's a whole lot more to individuals than what meets the eye. And I'll tell you, my intuition has come up with things, like literally things just fly out of my mouth that I'm like, wow, where did that come from? And they're like, that's exactly it. And I'm like, thank God, because, the way we get information isn't just, through bots and systems. There's a whole level of human activity that operates at a consciousness level that's beyond where AI is. So I would encourage people to use the tools, but not only rely on the tools for something like intuitive, work that a career coach can provide.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I do think there's a lot to be said for intuition, people who have it, people who use it, people who cultivate it. And I have a feeling it's going to become more of a branding moniker more and more these days. I love how you're using it. So thank you so much, Maggie, for sharing, and tell the people where they can find more about you and what you're doing.
Sure. So if they go to maggiemistal.com, it's MaggieMistal.com, they'll see the full array because I continue to evolve. I think one of the coolest things about coaching that I like is that I need to continue to evolve as well, because you're always, as a coach, just a few steps ahead of where your clients are, right? You're showing them a path, but it's a path you've walked. And so you will see, new things I've added, from personality patterns, assessment, to this biofield tuning I talked about, to even I recently did a career retreat at sea on a cruise ship.
Oh, that's right. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, it was a lot of fun. So it's basically soul search, research, and job search in the course of 1 week. And that sounds pretty surprising, because typically my process can be anywhere from 3 to 6 months over time. But yeah, I've been so happy. I did this actual same format in Lisbon in 2019 and had results. But then, COVID hit and it kind of stopped the whole retreat in-person thing. But now it's back, and I've updated it for 2025. And I was very, very pleased to see the progress that people can make in a week when they're focused on their soul search and research, and they left with an action plan to really make happen for themselves and their careers what they want. So yeah, it was a lot of fun too. We infuse a lot of fun and bonding and having support for each other, which is another beautiful aspect to, I would say to people, to just remember that as much as the tools can support you, don't forget that real people in your network, and growing that, is such a wonderful way to actually, we're in this together and we want to support each other. So don't forget about that piece as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Maggie. And I can't wait to be on your podcast too.
Yes, me too, Elise. Thank you so much.
Maggie and I have a lot in common, which surprised me since I've been so gung-ho on self-employment for so long. But we did agree on many points, so I hope you learn as much as I did. And if you want my help finding actual clients using AI, check out my new one-on-one AI client finding coaching calls, or you can just sign up for my quick tips at marketing-mentor.com. Once you're on the site, you'll find lots more resources, including my simplest marketing plan. So enjoy, and I'll see you next time.